The temperature had been going up and down by up to 10 degrees C. And the CO2 levels in the atmosphere also have been going up and down, up and down. And in the current interglacial period, something remarkable has happened. For the last 10,000 years, the temperature has remained constant. And people think this was natural, this is how it was. But if you look closely at what really happened, we discover that we came out of the glaciation, temperature went up, we went over the glaciation threshold about 10,000 years ago. And then if human beings had not been there, we would have gone back to glaciation 5,000 years ago. But because our ancestors went and deforested like crazy, created those deserts in the middle, they pumped all the CO2 up into the atmosphere and kept the temperature constant. So the actual temperature stayed constant for 10,000 years, even though we would have gone down to this by now, before the industrial era. So the amount of temperature increase we caused by just deforestation and raising animals for food and growing rice is A. And the amount of temperature increase that we caused by burning fossil fuels over the last 150 years is B. And it turns out that A is greater than B. So we kept the temperature constant by deforestation over the last 10,000 years, and then over the last 200 years we have built all the tools and technologies we need to keep the temperature constant forever without having to do deforestation. So we look at our current trend and say, if we continue pumping fossil fuels into the atmosphere, keep burning it, then of course the temperature is going to increase by about 5 or 6 degrees C, and then we're all going to die, and we're going to go back to glaciation again. So that's the future that they're showing there. But that's assuming that the caterpillar will remain a caterpillar forever. If instead we change from caterpillar to a butterfly, we can actually go back, maybe have a small increase in temperature and then hold the temperature constant from the forest. All we have to do is to bring back the forest. Simple. And we can do this. Because if you look at the global land carbon stock, there is more carbon stored on land, 3 times as much carbon stored on land than there is in the atmosphere. And the land carbon stock is dense where there are forests. This is where the Amazon is, and that's where the Congo is. And it's not so dense, it's sparse where we have deserts. So you can see the forests of the world and how they correspond to the land carbon stock. And they are all currently being eaten by our animals. So you can see the cows surrounding the Amazon eating into it. You can see the cows surrounding the Congo eating into it. So this is the density of cows on the planet. And take a look at India. Because India has a lot of lacto-vegetarians. And that's what happens. Because we drink milk when you don't eat the beef. And the cows are living for 25 years. So the analogy I like to use, imagine that you are a weightlifter. And you're lifting 5 times your weight above your head. And you discover that you're on quicksand and you're sinking. So knowing that your weight alone is too much for the quicksand to bear, what is the first thing you should do? Drop the weight. Now, suppose a bystander comes and tells you, no, double the weight you're lifting. What would you tell them? Go where? It's not being helpful. Suppose some other bystander comes along and says, your problem is that you are too fat. you should slim down to 1/6 of your weight. Then you can be lifting this weight too. Wouldn't you say, go away, you're not being helpful? But that's exactly the kind of stories we are hearing now. In fact, the analogy fits beautifully. Because 10,000 years ago, the weight of all the wild animals on earth was about 200 million metric tons. And human beings are a tiny little blip on top of that. And by 1970, the wild animals were down by 60% or more. Okay? And human beings, our one species, our weight was equal to the weight of all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago. And on top of that, we are carrying double our weight in farmed animals. That was 1970. And there was a loud hue and cry about population at that point. There's a book called The Population Bomb that came out, and everybody said, we have to cut our population down. And in India, Mrs. Gandhi went around sterilizing people forcibly. China instituted a one-child policy. So all kinds of draconian measures were tried to put in place to control population. And then they all fell by the wayside. And by 2010, wild animals were down by 52% from 1970 to 2010. Human population doubled. So our weight was now double the weight of all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago. And on top of that, we are carrying 2.5 times our weight in farmed animals. Even though the farmed animals were 2.5 times their weight, they were actually eating 5 times as much food as we do. Why? Because they are young animals. They are growing rapidly. So they are eating much more than their weight alone would indicate. And as soon as they grow, we kill them and we eat them. So we are on ecological quicksand here because wild animals are down by 52% in just 40 years. In fact, in those 40 years, human population doubled, human per capita consumption doubled. So our impact on the planet quadrupled. So if you take an exponential curve that has quadrupled in 40 years, and you extrapolate that out, and you ask yourself, how many more years can we do this before we wipe all the wild animals off the face of the earth? The answer is 16 years. Which means that by 2026, they'll be down to 0. Now, I made this calculation in 2014 when the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet report came out in 2014. So in 2014, they were reporting numbers up to 2010. Because it takes them 4 years to compile the data. So I made this calculation and I was so shocked. I blurted out in a public forum that, my granddaughter will be 16 when all wild animals die off. I want to pledge to her that there will be more wild animals than when she was born in 2010. Because we're going to have to reverse this. And everybody clapped. Everybody stood up and clapped. Because none of us want to see this happen. And then I thought, maybe what if I'm wrong? I'm just doing mathematical calculations. What if I'm wrong? So I waited 2 years. And in 2016, the World Wildlife Fund printed its Living Planet report, where they said that between 1970 and 2012, 58% of all wild animals died. Which means we are losing an additional 3% per year. And even if you just extrapolate that linearly, by 2026 we are going to be wiping them all off the face of the earth. So I know it's true. I know this is happening. And the reason it's happening is because we are super predators. We are not like any ordinary predator. If you want to kill a bear, you find the bear and kill it. No matter where the bear is hiding. There's no way for the bear to hide. We are now using GPS technology and satellite to track the last remaining fish in the ocean to catch them and kill them. So this is why they have no place to hide. They are going to die. And I find that their suffering, the suffering of wild animals, is much more immediate concern to me than all other suffering, because we have to reverse this. And this is why I say by 2026 we are going to transition to a vegan world. That's the only way out. But the plan of our leaders is to double farmed animal production by 2050. That's their plan. This is what the UNFAO is planning to do. And if you follow their plan, by 2026 we are going to wipe all the wild animals out. And then of course our necks are going to be on the chopping block. Now the UN Environmental Programme has predicted that by 2050 the whole world will be vegan. So the only way for these two things to happen is for us to also reduce in population to that little dot. So this is the techno split. This is what they're working on. The techno split future. Because the world leaders are all stuck in the current system, and they think they have no other way to do this. And they are just trying to make sure that they are on the other side of the techno split. We did 3 documentaries to show why this is happening. Why it is so systemic. So in the human experiment, we showed that there are 87,000 different chemicals we're pouring into the environment. 250 billion tons every year. And these chemicals, most of them are toxic, and they work their way up the food chain. And then we convince rich people to eat more animal foods. The richer you are, the more animal foods you have to eat. That's the story we have been telling people. But the animal foods have concentrated doses of these toxins. So therefore the rich people fall sick. And then we come along and fix them with pharmaceuticals. And in every step of the way, people are making money. So this whole thing, from toxins to animal foods to chronic diseases, it's about 40 to 50% of the economy. This is the artificial growth, the cancer, that nobody wants to stop. Because it's as if they have to come and tell you that they're going to shrink the economy, and no one will want to do that. There's a lot of jobs will be lost in the current system. So it's systemic. But the only way out is for the butterfly story to come into fruition, right? In the butterfly story, we're going to drop the weight so that the wild animals can remain the same by 2026. So we retain at least the same in terms of biomass that we had in 2010. Remember, we're already in 2017, so we've lost another 21% of that. And human population is going to increase a bit. And then over time, our population will decrease because we become the thermostat species of the planet. We understand what we're doing. And when we have a system that has equality built in from the outset and sustainability built in from the outset, we automatically have less kids. We see that in our societies. So our population will decrease over time and wild animals can come back. So this is the great transition to a life-affirming global culture. And the good news is it is already happening. By 2010, 12% of millennials in the US were vegan. 4% of Gen Xers and 1% of baby boomers. And between 2010 and 2016, you will see that the interest in veganism has tripled. And has tripled in all the economically rich countries of the world. The United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Austria, United Kingdom. So this is a trend that's not going to go away. It's a lasting trend. And the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change came out in 2015. It was the first major religion declaration that asked all people to go vegan. So even though Al Gore doesn't talk about it, or nobody wants to talk about it, it is happening from the grassroots. But we also have a responsibility as vegans to build a new system in which a vegan world is compatible. And Buckminster Fuller said this. He said he never changed things by fighting the existing reality. It's not about going and changing the current system and trying to make them go from selfishness to selflessness, go from greed to generosity, and to go from apathy to activism. You cannot do that because it's not set up for that. It's set up for the caterpillar. The only way to do this is to create a new system in parallel, which is based on selflessness and generosity and activism, and build that out. And then ask people to come and join you. And that's what we're trying to do with the Sacred Lifeline project. It's actually an academic project with a number of universities involved. We made this proposal to the MacArthur Foundation. It was designed for Crestone, Colorado. So basically it has a community of researchers and people living together in a vegan world, so to speak. And we are trying out how would we create a scalable system that anybody can come and copy in different places in the world. So here's what the living quarters would look like. These are basically tiny homes for privacy, individual privacy, and then a community center in the middle where we come together for food. And between the tiny homes and the community center is the greenhouse where we're growing food. So the community is built around growing and cooking food. And for 3 such clusters, there is one meditation hall in the middle. So it's what it looks like. Now, unfortunately, the MacArthur Foundation did not fund it. They said it was too radical. So we know that we are not going to get funding from the top down for something like this. But there's a proposal that we have made to the city of Tempe in Arizona for a smaller version of it, which is just about 13 houses, 13 tiny homes, and a community center in the middle with garden in between. So again, it looks very similar. You have solar panels. So essentially it's energy independent and it is communal living. And this one we made the proposal on August 15th and we are expecting the city to announce who the winners are. And that's my granddaughter now. And I never tire of telling her that she's the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. Because she changed my perspective. She pulled me out of my depression, put me on the other side and said, look at it this way. And things started making sense. And here are the 2 books I wrote. Carbon Dharma. Dharma is what is the right thing to do. And it's fairly easy to figure this out because it's all about compassion and love. So I wrote this in 2011. And then yoga is what is the right, how to go about doing it. And that came out last year. So this tour is part of my book tour for Carbon Yoga. So anyway, I believe that the vegan world will happen by 2026. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Sailesh, and thanks everybody who came and listened. I think now we can have a bit of Q&A, is that right?
Sure, absolutely.
Shall I do you want to put the lights up a bit?
No.
Do you like it the way it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I start?
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to, I think it's amazing, it's just I'm so optimistic. I wish I felt so optimistic, 2026, but anyway, we hope. It was something you mentioned right back when you were talking about the sanctuary,
Right.
and obviously they don't want humans going in there, and I think you made a comment about like everything fits on the planet except for humans. And I don't know, I felt a little bit uneasy about that because humans come in many forms and we are just another animal on this planet. And actually the sort of humans we're talking about are the humans that have developed with the industrial, capitalistic, consumerist society. But out there, in lots of places, in forests, there are people who are living as part of nature, and they fit in okay. The problem comes when you get people from outside come in and introduce other things to them.
Right.
So we do fit in there, but not in the form we've taken on.
Right. So the point I was trying to make is the reason they had to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside is because of poaching.
Yeah, sure, I understood.
So then it occurred to me as well that this couple fits, right? I mean, they're sitting there, they're taking care of the sanctuary, and they clearly do belong there. And why do the poachers not belong? Well, someone up there who has a lot of money says, I would love some ivory trinkets. And to supply that ivory trinket demand, someone else is going and killing an elephant and getting the ivory from the elephant and creating the trinkets. So, for the poor people around there who are stuck in the current system, every elephant looks like a walking $1,000 bill. So it's systemic. And it's the separation that the person who's making the demand has no idea what is happening. We fill that demand. Or maybe they do, and they don't care. So that's the separation that's causing all this catastrophe, right? The greed and the selfishness and the apathy. So it comes down to those three things that Gus said. But that is systemic. So you have a system that creates this dynamic. So by changing the system, we actually can create a society that is in harmony with life. So this is the transition going from a life-destroying culture to a life-affirming culture. And I really do believe that this life-destroying culture was essential. Without it, we wouldn't have built all this technology that we need to monitor the Earth's temperature or to monitor the Earth's CO2 level. All the scientific things that we're doing now, we couldn't have done without this culture, this life-destroying culture. Why? Because all of our technology we created just to kill each other. It just has dual uses, right? In fact, I was working on the internet from 1995, and it was all funded by DARPA initially. It was funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the US. The military funded my research. But as I said, things change very fast. Things change, these nonlinear transitions that happen. And we get on the other side and we can't even imagine how this change happened, right? But it happens. This is how we have always been. The internet was one example I gave. And in 2005, there was the city of San Francisco started issuing marriage licenses for gay people. And the California Supreme Court stopped it. And I was having dinner with a colleague and he said, I'm glad they stopped it. This should never happen. Gay people getting married, men getting married to men, this should never happen. And 10 years later, it was normal. So there was a massive change in social attitudes that happened in 10 years. Because that gentleman who told me that was normal during that time. That was the mainstream opinion at that time that, yeah, men shouldn't get married to men, and women shouldn't get married to women. But 10 years later, it was normal. I mean, everybody thinks that, yeah, of course they should get married. They just love each other, right? So that's the kind of nonlinear phase transition that I'm talking about now. So again, the same thing happened to me in 2015. I was giving a paper at the AGU, the American Geophysical Union, fall meeting. So this is the largest gathering of climate scientists in the world. So 20,000 climate scientists come every year for this meeting. So I was presenting a paper on how much carbon can get sequestered if the whole world goes vegan today. And we showed that by just returning the grasslands back to the original forests that were there in 1800, okay, just by replacing the grassland with the original forests, only 41% of the grasslands could be replaced like that, because the remaining 59% were deforested before 1800. So you have no record of it. You have no record of what the original forests were. So on that 41% of the lands, we were able to sequester more carbon than we were into the atmosphere since 1750. And this is something that they could not dispute. It's just an addition. We're just replacing grassland with native forests and adding up the extra carbon we put in there. So they couldn't dispute it. They told me, yeah, you're right, but it will never happen. I said, I have heard this twice before. Once during the internet, it will never happen. And then gay marriage, it will never happen. Now they say veganism will never happen. So I told them by 2025 it will be normal. This is what happens to me every 10 years. I get this nonlinear phase transition that I'm part of. Yes.
When my son was about 4, so that's probably about 20 years ago, I wanted to be part of a vegan community. So I went down to Cornwall where they were going to build houses, and it relied upon you selling your house. And so all the people were interested in the idea all met in the place called Plants for a Future, and we were all really enthusiastic about it until people came to talk to us about communities they'd lived with, and they'd started off being vegan. Everything went along swimmingly for a time, and then one person came in and completely upset the whole apple cart.
Mm-hmm.
And before you knew it, they were actually killing animals on the site. And that also happened at quite a famous place called Lauriston Hall. I don't know if you know that, but that's a place from the 60s that was set up as
Right.
vegan. And now they butcher animals on the site.
Right.
So, I kind of, oh my God,
Right.
I can't put myself into that situation. I could find myself having sold my house, come down there, and then somebody comes along and completely destroys it. So I wonder how possible it is to kind of control situations.
Like the farm also went through the same thing, right? The farm in Tennessee, there's a huge vegan community in Tennessee in the 70s that went through the same transformation. The industry will fight us. Right? So we probably will send infiltrators to do this sort of thing. But there are things that we have now that we didn't have in the 70s. So we have the ability to create systems where we can guarantee fairness. We can guarantee distributed banking. Things like that. So the power cannot get concentrated in anybody, in any one person. So you can really